You got to start things off. I mean, I always like to have a relaxed atmosphere, and I don't even mind if people interrupt me when I'm talking, as long as you don't boo me and throw stuff at me. But my life's changed in the last 2 months. And this is true. We got a dog, and I had dogs growing up, but we lived out in the country, and they were outdoor dogs. And my kids who are grown now, they always beg me for an indoor dog. And I told them, I said, well, I got to pick up after you. I'm not going to pick up after a dog too. And so I never would let them have a dog. But my granddaughters are 9 and 7, and they laid it on my heart to get a dog. And we got a dog, and she's the sweetest thing. And we had an addition. We had a little granddaughter born in California, February the 5th. And so my wife went out there for about 10 days, and she came home. And this is a true story. And she came home, and boy, Annie, 10 days, she had really missed her mommy. And so my wife took a red eye from California back here, and so she got here like 5 or 6 in the morning. And she comes in, and I wake up, and she's all over that dog, loving it and kissing it. And then she comes over and kisses me. I said, come kiss the dog before you kiss me. She said, well, you weren't wagging your tail. So anyway, I tell people, and this, what I want to talk to you about is really some of the issues that are facing the county right now. And I tell you what, I sure appreciate Patricia and conservative groups. David, thank you for your leadership. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Alan, thank you. And Vance, I appreciate you being a watchdog, because I've never been afraid of scrutiny. One of the things that I'll tell you, though, is that being on the county commission, and what I want to do is just talk about some of the issues that are facing us right now, and most of it comes down to money. And I tell people that being on the commission is a lot like life. It's a lot more fun when you have money. But, what drives our revenues primarily are property taxes. And over the last 5 years, we've had almost $35 million decrease in property tax revenues. And I mean, this is unprecedented times for us. I mean, this is unprecedented. And we have not raised millage rates, even though the assessments have gone down drastically, and we're still trying to provide a good level of service and at the same time maintain a high quality of life. And you know what? When you pay tax bills, like when I got my tax bill this year, I have to tell you that it was, I noticed, I mean, you pay your taxes once a year. I can't tell you right now to the nearest $100 what mine was. I can give you the general range, but I know that when I got my bill, that it seemed like, $200 or $300 less than what it was last year. And I thought, gee, this is good. And then my dad, who's 84 on a limited income, and he owns a 10-acre piece of property that he's lived on all of his life. And I look at his property tax bill, and it's about, it's about 10%, over 10% of what he brings in a year. And so I guess it really depends on who you are and what your perspective is on whether property taxes, whether you feel like you got a break or whether you feel like that you're paying a whole lot. So what we've tried to do this year as a commission, and I'll tell you, I mean, you're always going to have differences in a democracy, and when you have 5 elected people, but for the most part, we get along pretty well, and for the most part, we have similar philosophies. And we want to try not to raise taxes. And we actually fired a county manager, and one of the reasons we fired that particular person was they wanted to raise taxes when we had $20–30 million in reserves. But now that's what I would call gluttony, actually. But we've taken a more austere approach. And what we have seen this year is we're going to need a 6% across the board cut in order not to raise millage rates. Now, to understand the county budget, if you take a circle and that's 100%, the county commission portion is somewhere in the neighborhood neighborhood of about 35%, maybe not quite that much. And so we, even though we have to vote on all the rest, we only control, or we personally only control about that 1/3. The other could be debt service. It could be, most of it actually is the constitutional officers. A big part of it is the ambulance service and the sheriff's office. Now, one of the things I tell people is that if you turn on the news at night, you'll see murders every night on Channel 9. I watch Channel 9. I tape it at 11 o'clock. And I'm usually watching sports or Fox News, but I'll go through it just to see if anything's going on in Lake County that I need to know about. And we would never want to become what Orange County has in terms of quality of life. I mean, there's areas of Orange County that you don't even want to drive down. And we don't have that in Lake County. And I feel like that, I mean, my ear's pretty close to the ground. Well, and people like our ambulance service. People like our police protection. I'm not saying that it's the most efficient system in the world. It's probably not. But cities like to have the Tavares, Mount Dora Police Department. They like to have, their first responders. And so what you have to do as a commissioner is you've got to figure out, how can we cut our budget without impacting services. And I can give you a perfect example. And there's some things that are like taboo. You just cannot cut. Public safety is one of them you got to be real careful about. But I'll give you a perfect example of where we saved $1 million and didn't impact public safety at all. When Sumter County got out, divorced Lake EMS. Remember when it was Lake Sumter EMS and now it's Lake EMS? It's been that way for about a year and a half. We hired a consultant company to look at us and make recommendations. One of their recommendations was to change your deployment plan. In other words, how you assign your personnel. Now, I tell you what, it is amazing with computers and software and all the stuff that you can do, what you can do. But I will tell you that on Wednesdays, people don't call ambulances. I don't know why, but if you can just look, and there's times in Wednesdays where people don't call ambulances, but if you go to Fridays, you get bombarded with calls. So what Berkshire said was instead of being staffed at Friday levels on Wednesday, that you need to have a deployment plan that matches your call volume. I hope I'm good. I know what I'm trying to say. I hope that I'm articulating it. We saved just about $1 million without sacrificing anything. And what's the cold hard fact about that? The cold hard fact about that is that, number one, we were overstaffed when we didn't need to be. And the other brutal truth is that at the time, you would like to think that your administrators would be identifying that so they have to have a consultant to do it for you. Okay? So anyway, but the point is, and Lauren Ritchie wrote a really nasty column about me. I shouldn't use the word nasty, but it wasn't complimentary. Oh, I don't know, about 2 or 3 years ago, criticizing me on Lake EMS and criticizing me on Lake EMS. She's actually written some stuff about some other commissioners too. But I will say at the end of the day, I feel like time proved me right because we saved $1 million and made some personnel adjustments that I thought that we really needed to make. So one of the other things, and I got a page here I guess I need to read from, but if you go back to 2009, I told you we had lost about $35 million in terms of property value revenues. We've cut our overall budget since 2009 by $75 million, and we've cut our general fund budget by $32 million. Now, the overall would count the constitutional officers. The general fund is just the general fund of the county. But that will tell you right there, and and I think our number of employees, I've got that here too, but we've cut our employees down considerably. Yeah, just in 5 years, we've cut our employees down from 304 to 218, and that's general fund positions. That's a lot of percentage-wise. That's a huge percentage. But you know what? I know businesses that have cut 80% because they've had to. And that's one of the things I like to tell people. I've been in the insurance business since 1979, and I worked on commissions since 1979. So if I don't produce, I don't get paid. That's kind of a foreign concept in government, but it's really served me well in terms of my philosophy of serving in government. But you know, government cuts a third, and they think that you've beheaded them. But in the private sector, people out there cutting 50, 60, 70, and some 80%, some going out of business. And so, the only way out of this mess that I know of, and I don't know that there is one for the next 3 years, frankly, to be honest with you, but the only way that we're ever going to get out of this mess, is, in my opinion, is through, you know, job creation in the private sector. And so we've done, at the local level, about all you can do. We're kind of fighting a real strong tide. You know, banks won't lend money because of Dodd-Frank, making it impossible for people to get money. And but you know, we've waived impact fees. We've seen some success in some, you know, in some job creation because of that. And I mean, interest rates are still low. We've got an incubator program to where we help businesses, start-up businesses. We help them in an incubator program that we work with University of Central Florida. Then we have a business incentive program. Now, because of the budget, we may not be able to sustain all those programs, frankly. But you know, I think those of y'all who were here 5 years ago can remember that the county had a really anti-business reputation. We don't have that anymore. I think that we've, you know, and it hadn't been all Jimmy Connor, I'll guarantee you that. But there's been a big effort on a lot of our part to change the image of the county to where we are, you know, competitive with other counties. And you know, you need impact fees at some point in time. But right now, I will sacrifice the government revenue for job creation in the private sector. And that's been my position, and I think that for the most part, that's the commission's. You know, that's been the commission's position. So I think that we've been pretty successful in changing our image in the business community. One of the things that it's kind of old news, but I'm proud of the fact that we stopped a second judicial building from going up into Berries. You know, there was a plan when I got elected in 2008 to go $40 million more in debt and to build a second judicial building. Thank goodness we didn't do that. You know, I've been told by some people to back off of certain issues. And to be honest with you, I don't take orders like that very well whenever I feel principled on something. In fact, the way to really get me to fight is to tell me to back off of an issue. I had a commissioner tell me at the commission meeting Tuesday to back off of a certain issue. And that's, you might as well just tell me to dig in and fight more when you tell me to back off of something that I believe in. But, well, Cadwell helped me. And we stopped that $40 million of debt, and now, in hindsight, that was a no-brainer, and thank goodness we did that. And I think that the county has managed its debt pretty well. We get emails from the Florida Association of Counties, and one today is there's a county in Alabama that's on the verge of bankruptcy because they've misspent money so much. And so we certainly are not in that kind of a situation here in Lake County. You know, there's some things in life that I don't understand. How the President of the United States and how Nancy Pelosi and Patty Murray and Dick Durbin and the Democrats in Washington can with a straight face say we don't have a spending problem when we're $16 trillion in debt. When President Bush was president, President Obama said $6 or $8 trillion of debt was unpatriotic. Yet $16 trillion, we don't have a problem. I don't get that. I mean, seriously, if you spent every month 40 cents on every dollar, you put it on your credit card, that's what we're doing right now. And I mean, somebody in Washington on our side has got to get a message. We've got voices, but we don't have messages. We got to have messages. I mean, what we're doing to our kids and our grandkids is criminal. You know, Jay Leno. I mean, Jay Leno's the other night said something about, you know, it's not a big deal that the United States is running out of money. What'll be the big deal is when China runs out of money. and you know, I'm sure that y'all all had investments. I had some money set aside for my son's college. He's out now. But I thought that maybe it would get through me 4 years. Well, it built up for a little while, and then it started building down. It started going down, not building, but decreasing. And you know, you get that statement in the mail, and every month, and it's just a number on a piece of paper. It's just a number on a piece of paper until tuition's due. Then it's not a number on a piece of paper anymore. And that 16 trillion is more than just a number on a piece of paper. I mean, I think that that's the biggest threat. I think that and liberty and freedom. You know, I'm a little biased. I don't mind telling you, as I said, I've been in the insurance business since 1979. But I'll tell you that a government, I mean, the power of, I say I hate the government. My wife says, do you hate yourself? And I said, no, I just hate the government. I mean, they mocked Sarah Palin like she was a stupid little school child when she said that we would have death penalties on Obamacare. And now we know it's a reality that death penalties will be there. You can call them what you want to, but whether you, I mean, a government, you should fear your government, because a government that owns your health care, they own you. And right now, I mean, Bloomberg in New York is trying to say you can't have a diet soda more than 16 ounces. I mean, when is it going to stop? I don't know how y'all feel, and I'm sure it's a pretty, I hadn't even planned on mentioning this, but I'm going to anyway, and I'll probably make half of you mad, because it's a pretty evenly divided issue. But I'm against red light cameras just because I consider it to be more intrusion of the federal government into your lives. I really do. I think there's got to be better ways. There's got to be better ways. But see, all the red light cameras are, it's all about money. That's all it is. That's all about money. You know, it's like the lottery. It's like gambling. It's all about money. And so, to tell you a story, I don't like to talk very long, so I'll stop in about 2 minutes. But my little girl was like 2 or 3. And this was 23 years ago. And this is just, I guess, a point of personal story that really opened my eyes. But I was watching the Chicago Cubs on WGN, and she can hardly, you know, she can talk and everything, but she's standing up there, just this little thing about this tall, and she's saying, I'm a Cubs fan and I'm a Bud man. And you know, I mean, I know, but you know what? Alcohol is the #1 killer of alcohol-related accidents. Is the #1 killer of teenagers in America today. Yet we're pounding our kids with pro-alcohol messages that way. I mean, I'm not trying to get on my high horse, but I'm just saying that when you look at what's going on in our culture today, you know, I hate to say it this way, but I tell people I'm glad I'll be dead in 30 or 40 years, because I'd hate to see what this country's going to look like. But anyway, I was asked, is Laura here from, okay, Laura, you did make it in, okay. There's Laura, who is a council member from Astatula. Thank you for being here. I'm going to turn it over to you in just a minute, but because Patricia had asked me to talk about the roundabout out on Montverde, out of 561 and 455, and that's a federal government project. That's a federal government project, and it's one that passed 4-1. I was the one, but you know, if you've got a road project should be driven by your local governing board, your county commission, or your Astatula City Council, or the residents in the area. We've got an MPO, which is a regional transportation board, and they're the one that drove this, and they basically admitted that we are a quote-unquote guinea pig for a roundabout. The federal government's decided they want roundabouts. So we're putting a 160-foot roundabout, or is it 180? I think it's 180 feet, because because my son played football, I played football. It's 60 yards, so that'd be 180 feet. Mr. Couch, is my math good? My math is good. My math is good. Anyway, think about 60 yards for a roundabout. Out in Astatula, the intersection of Astatula and Montverde, and the traffic counts didn't show justification for it. It wasn't in the 5-year plan. And yet, I mean, here's the thing about it. And I respect my fellow commissioners. They have every right to their opinion, obviously, and they certainly can justify their position. But I learned when I was in my 20s, you're either part of the problem or part of the solution. And I think if we are spending federal money from a government entity that's $16 trillion in debt for a project that is not so urgent that it's not even on our 5-year capital plan, then I don't think that we should be having that project. And so I have fought against it, and I'm going to continue to fight against it, because it's, other than the $40 million of debt for the Judicial Center, this is the second most egregious project that I've seen since I've been on the commission. And I hope to be able to stop it at some point in time down the road, because we're in the early stages of it. It was driven by the executive director of the MPO, and TJ's a personal friend of mine. But you got to quit spending federal money just because it's available. I mean, if you were going to spend it on a road project that you needed or a bridge that you needed, then that's a whole different subject. But I do believe that if you're going to spend some money on a project, that the criteria for spending should be the same for local dollars, state dollars, and federal dollars. And if everyone would take that approach, we wouldn't have all these earmarks and all this debt that we've got. And so, did you want Laura to speak next? Or do you want me to answer questions, or let her speak and then ask questions, or how do you want to do it?
It's your time.
Well, Laura can talk about that roundabout, and then maybe people want to ask us further questions. It'll be all right. So. Laura, pronounce Sokolowski? Sokolowski. This is Laura Sokolowski. She's a council member in Astatula, and I appreciate her being here. And I think she will talk to you about that roundabout from a council member's perspective. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me. Not just a council member's voice, but also a resident, a taxpayer in that area, and basically the person that goes and talks to everybody and gets their opinions. A lot of people in Astatula and the outlying area do not want that roundabout. They are absolutely against it. They said this is the stupidest thing. It's as stupid as what is existing there. They've come up with some other ideas. Somebody says, well, it's a low-lying area. Maybe there could be like a bridge. 561 be on a bridge, 455 go underneath. Another person suggested getting rid of those. They have these turn lanes. They're called pork chops. Make them one way just for right turns, and put a turning lane on each of the roads so people can make left-hand turns, and then they can go and use the little pork chop thing for a right turn. But what hasn't been addressed in any of these solutions is the need for lighting. Right now there is really no lighting at that intersection. Now you have little signs that say dangerous intersection ahead with a flashing light, maybe about 3/4 of a mile away from the intersection on a curve that you don't even see where the intersection is. And there's no lighting in the intersection. Most of the accidents that will occur in that area is when the fog is in, when it's dark, and people do not see that there's a stop sign for 455 to cross 561. So the education is not there to let people know. I'm fearful, as many other people are fearful, that you go put a roundabout in, you think that's going to be the cure, and you're not going to do any lighting, and you're going to expect people to be aware or even know how to use a roundabout. And so now you've got other issues, and now you might have created more of a traffic hazard. A lot of trucks go down that road. Now, the legal limit for a semi is 60 to 75 feet. Most of them opt for the 75 feet because the 75 feet is a bigger trailer, they can haul more stuff and make more money. Well, when you're going north on 561, you've got a couple curves, you're going downhill, and you've got a curve right before that roundabout. If you're an unfamiliar truck driver and you don't see that little sign with that little flashing light, you do not know what lies ahead for you. And it could be catastrophic for him, because he's not going to be able to stop, and he's not going to be able to maneuver if he's fully loaded. There's a concrete pipe company right there in Astatula. Those trucks, those trailers can only have to be 45 feet in length because they carry so much weight. Now, if that truck was coming downhill into that roundabout and didn't slow down just enough, I am afraid to hear what might happen with that. So I believe in improvements, but I don't believe in throwing an improvement, what somebody says who does not live in the area, down your throats. Spending money that really doesn't need to be spent. Right now, they can just put a flashing light up there. We're in Florida, solar lighting, and have a flashing light so the people on 455 can see that there is actually a stop up there. Put a caution going over the 561 area so people know that there's a caution. None of that stuff has been addressed. They just want to do a roundabout because that's what they do in Europe, and that's what they feel is going to be the perfect solution. So a lot of people in Astatula are very upset. A lot of people in the outlying areas are upset, and I'm going to continue to ask them, sorry, Jimmy, but they're going to be emailing all of the county commissioners on a regular basis because they need to be heard, not somebody that has nothing to do with the area to be heard.
to yell to ask a question, but who would like to address Jimmy first? Like you need a microphone.
Now, my question was basically about the intersection versus the roundup. Were there a comparison of accidents on that intersection versus the 19 and 455? Because recently there was a horrendous accident. A little child died, the dad.
The answer to your question is yes. And the average accident there was about 1 every 6 months. And I think that there was one fatality. It was a motorcycle. If you go back to 2000, but I mean if you were basing, there was a reason that this particular intersection wasn't on the 5-year capital plan. It's because the crash data and the traffic counts didn't support it being on the 5-year capital plan. And I'll try to keep my answer to 30 seconds. This is what aggravates me. It's almost like drugs. The federal government decides they want a roundabout, like maybe because they do it in Europe. I don't know, but somebody in the federal government likes roundabouts, and so we could use the $1 million. It'd be nice if we could decide where we're going to spend it, but no, we got to go spend it out there where they tell us to. And so they do kind of have you by the throat. But in my judgment, if it's not a project that's a high need, and if the crash data had shown otherwise, then it'd be a completely different, situation.
I got a lot of phone calls about 455 and 19 saying,
Yeah.
take this to the commissioner. It's like, where are these people tonight?
Now, I don't know. I don't know the crash data at that intersection. Yes, sir.
Mr. Hunter, I'd like to know if there were other sites considered, and what was the primary determining factor that resulted in the roundabout being this particular site being chosen for the roundabout?
If there were other sites considered, I don't know what they were. I don't believe that.
6 others that they've got in a master plan. They got 7 of them.
No, but he means for this particular.
No, Vance is right. Vance is hitting on my point.
Oh, well, they're thinking about putting more roundabouts at other places. Is that your question?
Not really.
No. What your question was is for this particular project,
get chosen?
were there other projects that they looked at?
And why was this
Okay.
one chosen as opposed to the others?
And all I can tell you is from the staff level, if they considered other intersections, I'm not aware of what they were. Now, I know that they've got other roundabouts planned down the road at other places. One of them's right up here at Eudora Road. They're thinking about putting a roundabout there at Eudora Road and 19. You know, that is a messy intersection. I don't know if a roundabout's the answer there or not. I really don't. But I'll say this: at least you got traffic there. Okay, I mean, at least you got traffic there. I don't know what the accident data is. But Mike, if there were other intersections considered for that money, they may have done it at the staff level, but I don't recall them ever bringing to us any different roundabouts sites for that particular one. Vance?
Just what I remember the staff saying is that they own all that land there, so they don't have to go out and buy the right-of-way, because those
That could be.
separate roads
Well,
gave much more space so they can build the whole thing without having to buy any other land.
And guess what? Who funds the government?
Right.
Property owners. Did anyone ask the property owners
No.
out there how they feel?
No.
Let me tell you something. I know some property owners out there that are against this. But that wasn't considered either. So, and that never even came, I didn't even know it till after the fact, actually. So, you know, y'all, I don't know, if you're not from Astatula, you probably don't know Randy Carter, but we went to school together. He's been an appliance guy ever since I can remember. And he comes and he'll fix our washer or dryer. And, you know, Randy's a guy, he's lived there all his life. You know, his daddy lived there. And I figure that Randy, of all people, his ears to the ground. And before this roundabout even became a big issue, he was fixing a little part of my stove one day. And he said, have you heard about that roundabout? He said, that's the craziest thing I ever heard of. And I thought, you know, Randy's like Mr. Astatula. I said, I bet you there's a lot of people who feel that way if Randy Carter does. Next question. Yes, sir.
Mr. Carter, I want to commend you on your speech today. It's really good.
Thank you. You're very kind.
But I want to just add on to what you said a little bit. I think our national debt probably is more like $100 trillion once we start adding in those entitlements. And
Over time.
But how do you and the rest of the commission go about making adjustments? And what I mean adjustments, cuts. Because you don't want to cut law enforcement like you said, and you want the government to do those things that it's constitutionally supposed to do. But there are some areas that you may have to look at in terms, I guess, of economic development. But how do you go about cutting that when you want to grow the private sector? And that's what they do.
You know, well, I mean, cutting is one of the most difficult thing that you do. And what you do is you look at your areas, and you know, I like to say that there's 3 questions. What do we want? What do we need? And what do we absolutely have to have? And I think that we are at the point that we are now at the what do we absolutely have to have point. And so, a perfect example, we just transferred Jerry Smith from our emergency management department to our ambulance, Lake EMS. We didn't fill his position. Okay, there's a position right there. We do that regularly. When our fire chief left several years ago, we promoted the assistant fire chief and just combined the duties. The answer to your question is you look and you're within your organization and you try to ask the question, what do we absolutely have to have? But now I will tell you this, that we have some unmet needs, and I mean most people in this room are probably conservative like I am, and for smaller government. At the same time, you know, we've got animals that we're euthanizing pretty regularly. You know, we have people will call you and they got code enforcement issues, and we've cut our code enforcement department. So let me tell you, I mean, there was someone whose dog got locked up over the over the weekend, and I got a call from the mayor of a city nearby, trying to help get a dog out. We didn't have anybody there until that Tuesday. So sometimes you're cutting, and I guess the point I'm trying to make is that you can't sit up here and say we're going to cut our budget without services being impacted at some point in time. And so you try to have a minimal impact. But in September of the year before last, my wife and I were at Chili's after church on a Sunday, and my phone rang. It was my dad. He had called me Saturday night before, and he wasn't feeling good. He said, "Son, I can't move. I'm in the kitchen." I said, "Dad, I'm only 5 minutes away." Well, he called me again before I just got up and left. We had 2 cars because my daughter was there. She had met us. And, you know, my dad was sitting in a chair in the kitchen, immobile, because he couldn't breathe. And, you know, the other side of property taxes is when that ambulance was coming to get my dad, I wasn't worried about my property taxes. I was worried about my dad. And so it's really, one thing I try to do, and I want to talk about my dad for just a minute. My parents were divorced when I was 6 years old. My dad raised me by himself, and we were very, very close. I hadn't seen my mother in 20 or 30 years, and don't care to. I wouldn't let her near my family, to be honest with you. But my dad, I mean, what a great man he is, and, you know, he took good care of me, and I tried to take good care of him. But, well, I tell you what, it's tough on you whenever, it's tough on you. I've talked to Dave about this, too, and it's tough on you. You know, when your parents get old, it's older. But, you know, I love him so much, and when the ambulance is on the way, you just want to make sure. I don't want to cut an ambulance budget and somebody that you love die because of it. And so, you know, but what I was going to say about my dad is he's all the time. You know the great thing about my dad. I mean, I'll be 60 years old in 2 years. My dad is still my dad. I mean, he's never been my friend. He's always been my dad. I don't know if you understand what I mean about that, but he's still being my father. And you know what the only thing he says? It says, "Son, I'm proud of you, and you just got to thank God for everything He's given you." And let me tell you, man, every day I thank God that He's put me in a position where I can be a county commissioner. And I want to tell you that I love being on the commission, and I love this opportunity. But you do have serious issues that are in front of you that can be life or death issues. So you don't want to raise taxes, but you don't want somebody to die because the ambulance didn't get there.
I got a question on this side of the room. Hi, Mr. Connors. My name's Carol.
Hey, Carol.
And brought up that ambulance system, and I had a conversation last week with a patient. I'm in the healthcare field, and I was talking with one of the Mended Hearts volunteers over at Leesburg. She actually had chest pain, and she knows her cardiac history very well, so she called 911, and she said she called about 4 times before she got someone to answer the phone. Now, I've already emailed Sullivan, because he's in that district for her, but I just wanted to share that with you, because you did bring it up, and that's very concerning. And by the time she did get 911 to speak to her on the phone, she actually said she was so stressed out and just like, "Get me out of here, get me out of here." And her son had arrived. So I just share that with you. I'm in the healthcare field, so I feel the pain that they have, but we probably have some work that we could do.
Yeah, if you're going to be here afterwards, if you could give, I mean, I would like to specifically look into that particular call. And I mean, if you'll see me afterwards, I'd like to look into that, because that's something that's not acceptable.
Well, and the other thing I wanted to mention, I think what you were talking about was what we call metrics in the healthcare field. So by looking at the call volumes and stuff, you can look at the metrics and sort of do your staffing. So I'm just curious, was that just a one-time thing, or are we doing that on an ongoing thing? Because in my business, we actually do metrics on an ongoing business.
We actually evaluate that monthly.
Okay.
And we, you know, and that's the other thing that I think that our commission has done, is that we have a Lake EMS board, and they give us monthly reports, where I think that when it was Lake Sumter EMS, that the board of directors were much more passive than we are. You know, we've got city representatives, we've got hospital representatives, and then we have the commission. And we're very active as a commission on Lake EMS issues. That particular situation should never happen. I hate to admit this, but what was it? I was with someone who was in my car. We saw, oh, yeah, there was this lady on the side of the wall on the road, and she looked like maybe she was on drugs or something. And I called 911 because it was at night and it was raining. Oh, that's right, I remember now. There was a lady, and maybe I think she was having a fight with her boyfriend or something. And she was sitting out in front of the car that had lights on. And I called 911 and it didn't answer. And then I called it back. And they said, oh, well, we've had several calls. So I didn't get too freaked out about that. But still, to call 911 and not get an answer, you know. Some people tell me, though, that whenever I call them, that the reason they don't answer is because they have caller ID.
Okay, I'm back over here.
Jimmy, other than the fact that Laura and Richie really get upset, why don't we hear talk about when we're looking for money that we're going to raise the village rate or we're going to look at reserves? What about the land that the county owns? Is there ever a for sale sign on any county land?
Well, there can be. The problem with most of the land acquisition that we have now was through a voter referendum, and it was to buy passive recreational land, and we did that. And of course, if you were to try to sell that now, you would lose a lot of money because of where the market is today. The other thing is that because that land was through a voter referendum, you got to be careful that you're not going against the will of the people when they take the opportunity to go vote. But now, specifically to your point, I think you're going to be seeing us pull away any money that we've got in those passive parks because I mean, we'll pay the debt service on the property, obviously, and we'll do minimal upkeeping. But in terms of the passive parks being anything but recreational property and just to go out and do some nature hiking and looking, you know, at you know, our natural resources, I don't think you'll see us putting a lot of money in there. But when I was on the school board, we did an inventory of property, and my goodness, you would not believe how much property that we had at the time. And so it's not a bad idea if you have surplus land to try to sell it or do something with it to generate some revenue.
Yeah, Jimmy, you made the comment that it's a whole lot more fun when you got big reserves and you got big revenue, and your job's a whole lot more fun. What concerns me right now is that, you know, it's like Marco Rubio says, we don't need higher taxes, we need more jobs, which gives us more taxpayers.
Right.
We've been very heavily involved in the past in the house building and the home industry. I personally think that's going to be a little slower to come back, like Orange County you see coming back pretty strong already. We had a good, strong economic development program start to develop in the last couple of years, and we are appearing much more business friendly. We lost our business development director, economic developer, Scott. Anyway, what are we going to do as a county to not only maintain that momentum, but step it up, because we're competing with hundreds and hundreds of counties that need that same industry that we're buying.
Well, and I think that the answer to that is that we have to be competitive with other counties, and I mean the first answer to that is that to me, one of the things that we didn't talk about yet is the permitting process. We want to streamline the permitting process. Right now, Lake County is one of the few counties in the state of Florida where you can do online permitting and do all of your permitting for residential. But a good example, and I think what Alan's talking about, is we got real top heavy in Lake County. Our property tax base was about 80% residential and about 20% commercial. Well, look, you know what the city of Tavares has done? I'm really shocked, actually, especially with the national environment the way it is. They've gone from 80-20 to about 65-35, and they've invested in their community. They have gone into some debt, I'll admit that. But at the same time, they've waived impact fees. They've done the seaplane identity. And at least downtown, they've got one hotel built, one that's currently looks like it's towards the end of the stages being built. But what we can do is continue to offer our business incentive money, continue to try to let the businesses know that if they come here, they'll be welcome, that the permitting process will be smooth, and then they're not going to get jerked around by staff who've worked for the government all their life instead of the private enterprise. So that's, but I think that we've made great strides in that in the last 4 or 5 years.
So I'm going to play dumb for a minute because I want to go back to the Astatula thing. I don't know anything about it except that it's federal money. And I know that that money can't go back into our budget, our national budget. So tell me what the problem is.
Well, we could turn the money away, but if we turn it...
But somebody else is going to use it.
It's someone else. Well, someone else will probably apply for it. The staff will tell you that someone else will get the money if you don't spend it. That's what they'll tell you, and that's one of the reasons people spend it, because they'll tell you that if you don't spend it, somebody else will. You know, and so that's why I said earlier that there's two sides to that issue. I don't want to be the one spending it. I'd rather someone else spend it, to be honest with you. If it's not a project that we need in Lake County. Actually, I think Laura made a good point. To me, if I was going to do anything with that intersection, I'd signal it with a traffic light. That's what I'd do. It costs probably, I think a traffic light there might cost $150,000, not $1.1 million. So, but you know, it's like I said, that the federal government had you by the throat. They do, and that's what they'll tell you. Well, if you, I mean, I don't know how many times T.J. Fish got up and said, if you don't spend it for this particular project, someone else will get the money. Well, so then we're just supposed to spend it. I can't do that.
Anyone else have a question?
I don't need a microphone. So the residents of Astatula have no inherent right to have a vote or tell government they don't want this? Or have
I'm not really sure. You know, I don't know all of the history of what the Astatula's involvement was in it. I'm sure there's some people there, depending on who you ask. They'll tell you that it's 50-50. There's other people, Laura, I'm sure, will probably tell you that it's not 50-50. I'll tell you, I don't think it's 50-50. But it's never too late to be heard. It's never too late to be heard.
Did you want to address her question?
A few years ago, they had some PDE studies, and they were talking about doing the whole road, 561, up through Astatula. And in the very beginning stages, they weren't going to do anything with 455 and 561 intersections. Then they decided that they were going to do something, but they weren't sure. Then they said maybe they could do a traffic light, because that was the cheapest thing to do. People were asking about a traffic light. And then another meeting, they came back with this, well, we're going to do a roundabout. The problem with these meetings were, there's a lot of people that are upset about this, but they weren't informed of this is what's going to happen at the meeting. It came out in a meeting that, well, we're thinking of a roundabout, that's the best way, and then no other meetings occurred that anybody can even voice their opinion. And that's how it worked.
Yeah, Jimmy, as you know, I've been going to the board meetings for probably 4 or 5 years now, and the same for the school board. And one of the differences between the corporate way of doing business and the local governments is that local government will go out and they'll get a grant or they'll get funding somewhere, whether it's the sales tax or whatever, to get capital funds to build something. And then, but they don't adequately budget or budget at all for the operations cost. So like your public lands that they bought for $30 million, it was all to go out and buy the lands, but then as the board discovered about a year or two ago, is that none of them were developed for human use because no one put together a budget for operations, maintenance, or even just creating a parking lot. And so, do you see any solution to that? Because to me, that is just gross mismanagement.
Well, and of course, I always like to say for those type of questions that acquisition was done, I don't know, several years before 2008. But, you know, Vance makes a very good point. You have to spend capital dollars differently than you do your operational dollars. But it would have made more sense when they put that ballot language on that some of that money could have been used for operational, rather than have to go and raid your general fund for your operational costs. And, you know, Vance, you know, I have to say that we agree a large percent of the time. There's people that don't like Vance because they don't like watchdogs. The same reason they don't like me. They don't like watchdogs. But first of all, you need to, if I can't stand scrutiny, I'm in the wrong business. But there's a lot of people that don't want the scrutiny. But I don't know what the answer is because of the way that the bond language was structured for capital expenses. But you're absolutely right. You can build a park, but the cost to maintain it is what gets really expensive, especially over time. So Vance is right about that. But I don't really have the do I have a solution for you? Back to what Alan said, growth and job creation will get your revenues up. And when you have your revenues up, that solves a lot of problems.
Jimmy, I was impressed when you gave the example of the EMS service, and by doing the matrix that Carol referred to,
Right.
we're able to save $1 million. Well, my question, and I think it resonates with a lot of taxpayers, is are we doing metrics on everything we do? I mean, again, the Lakeside Inn calculates how many customers they're going to have for breakfast every morning. And that goes to Carol's point. So my question is, are there other areas that we should be looking at in order to find some just operational management issues that can curtail the cost of government?
Well, we probably can do more, and I don't really want this written about just yet, but we discussed it. One of the things that I brought up in Osceola County, they have outsourced their library services, and they've saved hundreds of thousands of dollars. They got a different system than ours, but I think we can save about $300,000 a year to do that, and you protect your employees through the process. And so I know I'm looking. I know that I'm looking at other things, and I know that our county manager is, and I know other commissioners are as well. And so when you cut your employees, I think, from 304 to 218, that just didn't happen. Somebody's working to accomplish that. But we're still doing it. I'm sure we're gonna be forced not to hire some positions and continue to downsize. You know, one of the things that I said when I was elected in 2008, that I want to change the culture of county government. And I will tell you what, we've changed the culture of county government. It used to be the staff would spend, and the commission would rubber stamp. And now the commission has binoculars for oversight. And our staff knows it. And I think that all of us as commissioners feel that way now. And so one of the problems, though, is when I brought up the library issue, the initial pushback from other commissioners, you know, it almost makes it disincentive to even try to bring up something. But I don't get deterred. I mean, 4-1 doesn't bother me as long as I think that I'm right. I will say that. But I'd rather not. I'd rather have 5-0. But I think that the commission has agreed to look at the library services. We don't want to hurt our employees. But if there's a more efficient way to do things, then we've got to do it that way. So, I mean, the short answer is we're trying. Yes.
I think we'll have 2 more questions.
Regarding the roundabout again, and I may say this incorrectly, so correct me if I'm wrong. But when it was discussed, was it something that was on the consent agenda when it was finally decided to be a roundabout? Was it pulled? Was it discussed? Did the residents of Astatula know at the meeting that it was voted upon that was the meeting that it was going to be voted upon or discussed? And were there many Astatula residents there? Would you say
that the 4 other commissioners voted it, thinking that it was the right thing to do, or in spite of the residents there just to use the money?
Yeah, well, there weren't a lot of people there. Actually, here's one of the things that aggravates me about that roundabout. The commission voted 3-1 against it back in May of 2011. And yet, the MPO executive director kept pushing the project. I should have dug in then, but I didn't figure the commission was going to flip. But they did. You know. I don't think that, I mean, it was not on the consent agenda. It was an advertised meeting, and it was discussed. But there were not a lot of people there to speak up about it.
Did a letter go out to the citizens in Astatula? Like an actual, I mean, I respond best when I get those notices, like, we're having a...
No, there wasn't anything like that unless Astatula did something. You know, but you know, really, I would have liked to, look, I mean, I blame myself. I should have had more foresight. First of all, when the commission voted against it the first time, I should have dug in and told the executive director of the MPO that we weren't hearing it again because we said no, but he took it to the MPO board, which is Lake and Sumter County, and they all voted. I don't know if there's 15 of them, but it was one or two votes against, and I was one of them. Now, I knew then we were in trouble because the 2 commissioners that voted against it voted for it at that meeting, and I said, oh my goodness, I said, but I mean, you can only do so much. I mean, if other commissioners are for it, I don't control their vote. But I don't think there's been an uprising from the people in Astatula. I think Laura, she sent out an email, and I sent it out to people that were on my email list, and she brought up one particular point. Well, she brought up several. Laura, you'd be surprised. People think you're a genius. They really do. You would not believe the number.
Well, get me angry, and that's what I do.
Well, but you know, she talked about how that's a low-lying area with fog. I tell you what, I think a roundabout's going to make that situation worse there. You know, and we didn't think about it. I'm familiar with the area, but I'm sure I'm not as familiar with it as somebody who lives there and drives it every day. But I don't think that, it's just my opinion that the people of Astatula have not been heard on this issue.
Okay, is there a final question? Yes.
And Carol, I do want to get the details on that because that really alarms me.
So I'm going to be ignorant of it. I don't understand this thing either. So you get the money from the federal government to use to have these certain projects completed. Can you use, how much money is going toward this?
$1.93 million.
Ooh, okay.
1.093.
Okay.
I'm sorry, 1.093. About 1.1 million.
How much is county match?
None.
So
Zero.
Can Astatula use those funds to do a different project,
No.
or does it have to specifically be a roundabout?
It's got to be that specific project at that specific intersection.
Can it be something other than the roundabout? Can it be the extra lighting associated with it? Can it be doing the pork chop or the...
I don't believe so.
It has to be the
That's not the
roundabout.
way it was presented to the commission.
Okay.
It's a grant just for roundabouts.
Yeah. I mean, they're really trying to put, I think they want to put one up in Mission Inn at 19 and 48. 19 and 48. I know Mission Inn doesn't want one there. And they're thinking about one here. I don't know. Vince probably knows all the other locations. But hey, no one threw anything at me, and I appreciate it.
There's still time. We're going to
There's
go to
still
the
time.
lounge.
Yeah. Hey, they give refills on Diet Coke. So I'm in business, but hey, thank you, Jim. Thank you for hosting us. Patricia, you're wonderful. Jennifer is our award-winning essay contest winner from a year or two ago. Well, tell us about that for just a moment.
I don't remember.
Jennifer does too much.
Jennifer is a very impressive young lady. I'm very proud of her.
Well, I want to thank Jimmy for coming and volunteering to kind of give us a state of the county, to inform us a bit. And again, thank you, Jim Gutherson, for having us here. And there is a reception afterwards, a very informal reception over in the lounge, so you can talk to Jimmy and Carol. Y'all can talk. We can talk with one another. I did want to give you a couple upcoming dates. So if you have a pen available, we're going to be having our next town hall here at the Lakeside Inn is going to be on May 13th.